And welcome to this Thursday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest, although I may need to come on here with a blindfold and have somebody hand me the last drag of a cigarette because we were duped once again and passed on some losing information and input to you guys on the show yesterday. The streak is getting to be a little bit troubling. We went 0-2 in a couple of picks, ignoring the fact that Joel Embiid was not going to be playing with the Philadelphia 76ers a couple of nights ago. They barely scrape out a victory coming from behind and stealing one from Boston Celtics by 2 points while laying 3.5. And then we gave out on that same show a parlay with the Akron Zips, who had annihilated UMass the previous week and came back against the Kent State team that all of a sudden was showing some fight. And they end up winning Kent State in overtime. So we bury you guys with 2 losses. And then yesterday, while feeling a little bit tepid about everything, I mean, you start to get a little bit gun shy in making selections in any kind of public handicapping forum, which we're very happy to have here and have for a little over a year, over 300 episodes of Bury Your Bookie. And I would say we probably have at least a slight upside record with all of the handicappers we featured on the show, and including my own picks, which have suddenly gone dead effing lame. Really, really bad and very, very troubling. I'm very reluctant to make any kind of a selection on the show today. We were hoping to have Mike Jones with us. He had to scratch out today, and Mike's been on a little bit of a run lately, and of course is so deeply immersed in all the numerology that goes along with sports handicapping. But Mike couldn't make it today, so we're going to have the professor with us tomorrow. We'll get into some college football, a lot of interesting things going on in the college gridiron this upcoming weekend. And, of course, we do have a pro game starting out week number 11 tonight, as you have a little bit of a mystery game here with the Patriots, and now laying, I believe, 12 and a hook against the New York Jets. The Patriots and the New York Jets. Patriots at home. Patriots, one of the real Cinderella stories in the league, I guess you could call it that. There were people that were anticipating their over-under season win total for the year, where it was kind of high considering they only won 4 games last year. And another thing, I don't want to say that I was dead wrong about this, but I thought the emphasis on the hiring of Mike Vrabel now had to be better than Gerard Mayo, who won 4 games and had Drake May as a rookie quarterback last year. And Bob Kraft was quick. You don't see this too often where a guy, unless it's Cam Cameron with the Dolphins, where a guy gets 1 year and then whoosh, hasta la vista, baby, he's out of here. Realizing that he had made a mistake and that Mayo wasn't ready or up to the task. I don't know what went on behind the scenes there. The owner of the Patriots, Bob Kraft, decides, hey, I'm parting ways, and he was the leader in the chase for Mike Vrabel. And I thought, and my commentaries on other shows were of the nature of, when did Mike Vrabel become Vince Lombardi? He had a nice run there with Tennessee for a while, and then things went south. And when they went south, he was unable to coach the team up to whatever expectations they had. And then whoosh, he got the axe as well. He was highly coveted, even though he'd been out of the head coaching position for a little while. Not a long term, but long enough to make you think maybe this guy comes back in some other capacity. All of a sudden, all these head coaching positions opened up. Many teams were pursuing him for his services. It was natural that he would want to be and attracted to become the head coach of the New England Patriots, where he was such a great player. And was teamed up with Teddy Bruschi and all of those guys during the Brady era. Was fantastic, very intuitive player. We knew Mike Vrabel to be. Never forget that one play where he was against the Miami Dolphins. And Bill Belichick, for all of the conversation about Belichick, one of the things they were great at the Patriot organization, they would somehow always acquire a guy from the team they were about to play who had some insight into what was going on with that team. And I think the guy literally brought his playbook with him. This happened with Vrabel when the Patriots acquired Keith Byers from the Miami Dolphins. Keith Byers goes to the Patriots, and I think he detailed every offensive tendency of the Miami Dolphins to the defensive side of the Patriots lineup. And Dan Marino drops back to pass and tries to execute a play that he'd been very successful with. Vrabel, almost as if he had previous knowledge of the thing, steps right in front of it, intercepts a pass, turns the ball game around. And so you thought, wow, this is a heady ball player that's going to make a really good head coach. And sure enough, he did have success, like we said, but to take a look at what he's done. Remarkable what he's done so far, 8-2 with the New England Patriots. Are they worthy of laying double digits, though, against a resurgent, is it fair to say that? Resurgent New York Jet team that has won 2 in a row after losing their first 7. You thought they were going to throw in a towel. Aaron Glenn, you're thinking he might actually post a Blutarski number, 0.0 at the end of the season in terms of wins. They had the fire sale prior to their first victory where they got rid of 2 of their key defensive players in Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner. And you're looking at the situation there and thinking, they've realized that this isn't going to be their year. Of course, they come right back out of that and win, as we recommended that you go against them on another show. And are they good enough at this point? Do they believe in themselves enough to be within almost 2 touchdowns of the New England Patriots? So interesting proposition on the board tonight, but I don't know that you could count on me to touch that because of what happened last night. Never mind 2 nights ago when we went 0-2. Now, last night, I'm having a conversation with one of the reporters that is heavily involved with detailed coverage of the Miami Heat. And the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers had just played on Monday night. They played a thriller in Manila type of ball game, 140-138 in overtime. The Heat prevail. Jaime Jaquez Jr. was brilliant in this ball game. Andrew Wiggins, who was acquired by the Heat in the trade for Jimmy Butler when he went to Golden State. And that seriously had all the ramifications of being addition by subtraction because Butler had become, I don't even know if distraction is a strong enough word. It just become an evil influence on the Miami Heat with his complete indifference and turning his back on his team and not playing and pointing fingers at the great Pat Riley, who's on our all Elliott Ness team as being one of the untouchables. I mean, we don't want anybody saying anything negative about the great Pat Riley. I guess if you were a Knick fan and you're still upset that he turned in his resignation on a fax machine and eventually came down to Miami where he had a great run as a coach and now as an executive, are you entitled to be pissed off and have negative things to say about Pat Riley? Maybe. But let's take a look at what you're doing there. You're crying because the guy left your team. So obviously he must have done some good there. And if that's the reason that you're being disparaging and unflattering about Pat Riley, well, you're pissed because he left, not because he was doing a lousy job. So I think that negates all of the negative criticism that he receives from Knick fans. But that being said, and this is one of those situations I probably should have read the tea leaves a little bit better. All signs pointed. We had this discussion with our Miami Heat reporter on another show that we were doing, and all signs pointed to the Miami Heat being in complete command in this ball game last night. You were going to be resting if you were the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're sitting all of their stars. They're sitting Donovan Mitchell. They're sitting Darius Garland. They're sitting Evan Mobley. Now, we saw what happened when those guys were out after dominating the Miami Heat, blowing them out in a 4-game sweep in embarrassing fashion in the first round of the playoffs last year. And you thought Cleveland Cavaliers, with their best record in the NBA, serious contenders maybe to even win the title. If you had money on them, you were thinking you were in pretty good shape. So they end up getting humiliated as Halliburton had a big series and was really going strongly for the Indiana Pacers, who came on towards the end of the regular season and were making a great account of themselves in the postseason, especially even in the first round. Did they knock Detroit out of the first round? I think they did in a somewhat contentious series. Now in the second series, you have all of these Cleveland stars sitting out, and they couldn't raise a gallop. Indiana goes on, wins that, goes on and beats the Knicks, goes to the finals, takes Oklahoma City to 7. Unfortunately, Halliburton gets injured in the post game or the postseason and is out for the year this year with a torn Achilles, much like the Boston Celtics experience with Jason Tatum. And you're looking at those 3 guys out of the lineup last night against the Miami Heat and asking yourself, well, what's going to be different than it was when they were handled by the Indiana Pacers in the postseason? And the Heat raising hopes for their fans that, look, even without Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero in the lineup, they had amassed a 7-4 record, and it just won the previous Monday night. Now, I think one of the factors you have to look at when you're handicapping Miami Heat games in particular is, and I don't know this to be completely the fact, but South Beach is dead, I think, as an NBA sixth man. That was always one of the theories, that the best sixth man in the league was South Beach, because teams would come into town, maybe arrive in the middle of the night, and then just stay out all night. recollections of Allen Iverson showing up at one of these shoot-arounds. He's wearing a lampshade on his head. He looked like the team. There's always one team in the Hawaii Bowl, the Hula Bowl, or whatever they call it, where one team is all serious about it and all business, and the other team is just they got their quarterback is diving off the third floor of a hotel into the pool, and they've just been partying, and the reports are surfacing that all kinds of crazy stuff was going on behind the scenes, and then they get into the ball game there, and they just look completely disoriented. Iverson would show up like that to the shoot-arounds after being out on South Beach all night. And so here was a perfect storm of negative circumstances. You're sitting all of your stars. You have been in town since Monday night when you incurred a tough loss. And if South Beach was still South Beach, which I think people's perspective on this area of Miami, which was always pointed to by virtually everybody. And what's crazy, it's a Yogi Berra thing. I don't know that anybody goes there anymore. Not because it's too crowded, but because it may be passe as even a tourist attraction. I don't hear a lot about it. I haven't been to South Beach in years after being sort of an advocate of what was going on down there in the scene and the renovations that took place. And that revival, I think, is off. And I don't think it's a big factor anymore as a negative for teams that are visiting Miami, because the people on these NBA clubs don't seem to be partying all night on South Beach before they take on the Miami Heat. Here was a perfect situation where if that was still in vogue, you would have had just an added element and an added obstacle for Cleveland to overcome. So sure enough, what happens? We give out the Miami Heat. I think the line went off. They went off at 6. We had it at 5.5 yesterday on the show. All these guys are sitting out. The Heat are kind of cruising, although Cleveland's hovering around. The stage is set perfectly for them to go ahead and accomplish the cover. They're up 4 going into the fourth quarter, and you're thinking, here's where Cleveland just fades out of the game. And what happens? You get shellacked. 37-19 in the fourth quarter, lose the game outright, 130 to 116. And once again, what kind of fool am I? Now, this is not unusual, though, in the NBA. It's a fairly common circumstance, so we have to adjust our thinking on that whenever the odds look absolutely impossible to overcome. For a team that's lining up in the NBA, where they have none of their starters in there, key injuries to players that are very, very significant, just go the other way and at least take the points. The Detroit Pistons, what we're in a situation like this, where all of their starters were out last night. Everybody. Nobody was playing from the starting lineup. Now, this wasn't load or toad management. This was legitimate injuries, or at least so we think. And they're taking on the Chicago Bulls, who have been a pleasant surprise at the start of the season. An upside record. I think they might have been 6-4 going into this ball game. But Detroit, without anybody from their starting lineup, managed to, and they'd won 7 in a row. The likelihood they were going to be able to sustain that winning streak and put it up to 8 seemed almost impossible, certainly improbable. And so what happens in that game? Very similar to the Cleveland Cavaliers with nobody in the lineup. The Detroit Pistons go out and really lay one on the Chicago Bulls, 124-113. So the conclusion would be, and the lesson for gamblers out there is what appears to be the most obvious. So again, is the reason that gamblers die with their mouths wide open at the end of their life. Their last breath is taken. And the next thing you know, they're seeing the white light, and that number flashes in front of you of the amount of money that you've lost gambling in your lifetime. And the next thing you know, you're passed away. The embalmer has to find a way to close your mouth because you die like this. And that happened to us last night. So we're ice cold here on the show. Sorry about that. Buried you in our last 3 picks and didn't even come close. 131-16 in the game that we were willing to lay 6 points in. Nobody in the lineup for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they come to town and go ahead and beat the Miami Heat after losing the previous Monday, just 2 nights before, in what was a very, very entertaining ball game, but nonetheless a loss for the Cleveland Cavaliers when they were playing their guys. So you just never know. It's kind of rough. I did want to mention one more thing, and I'm going to spare you guys making a pick today because my lean would be, naturally, I mean, you're looking at the Patriots versus the Jets, thinking the Jets have been god-awful since the outset of the season, but with a little revival, I'm going to probably, my lean would be, and you can make note of this because it would give you a perfect opportunity to do something completely differently, but take a double digits in the NFL. Now, Patriots aren't really blowing people out. They let the Buccaneers hover around in that ball game last week to the point where even though they seemed to be dominating, the Buccaneers were in there with a chance at the end. Jets maybe a little bit more inspired than they've been by the 2 victories they've had in succession. So the first tendency would be to think if you're getting 12 and a half points, go ahead and take the 12 and a half points if you just want to have some action on the ball game. But now that I've said that, you can count on a New England Patriot blowout. But I did want to make note of this because this has become universal. We might have been the earliest proponents of this, the Mario Cristobal factor with the University of Miami, our hometown college football team here. They take on NC State this week. This gentleman, who's been a handicapper of college football in the New York Post, was brilliant a few years back. And since then has been sliding back to the pack, much the way that we have of late. A gentleman named Howie Kasoy has a record on the season of 73 and 92 against the spread. But he's the number 1 handicapper for the New York Post. He does this whole page of college football handicapping, if I can get it up here on the screen. And his analysis, like most people, even if you're losing, it sounds good. But we've been talking about the Cristobal factor. And that is Mario Cristobal, head coach of the Miami Hurricanes, still alive with a shot to make it into the college football championship playoffs, ranked 15th in the country, coming off a victory, a win, no cover against the Syracuse Orange, although you could look at that and give an excuse and say, well, look, they had to cover 28 in a hook. They won by 28. Still a substantial victory, unless Radakovich, the AD, is on the phone to Cristobal and saying, hey, listen, Mario, a lot of our boosters have money. That NIL money is going to dry up if you don't cover 28 in a hook. It couldn't be held accountable for only winning by 4 touchdowns. That's certainly a wide enough margin to consider that a convincing victory. But Kasoy on the NC State versus Miami game picks NC State getting 14 and a half. And the logic leads right into our theory about Mario. And so the awareness of the Cristobal factor, I think, has become more than universal. And Kasoy says, never lay multiple touchdowns with a guy, Mario Cristobal in parentheses, who has more losses in double-digit favorite situations, 5, than any other head coach in the country the past 3 years. Cristobal and the Cristobal factor is capable of fucking up anything. I don't know about NC State. 14 and a half, a couple of touchdowns, plus that sword of Damocles, the dagger. It's like a gaff going into the, into the water as you're trying to boat a sailfish. And NC State getting 14 and a half is his recommendation, strictly based on the Cristobal factor. So we'll have more insight into the college football tomorrow with the professor, maybe get into some college basketball plays as well. Season off to an exciting start. A lot of teams making really spectacular showing so far, and some highly competitive games in addition to the many blowouts that you get at this time of the year. So we'll get into college football and basketball on the program tomorrow. Our apologies for Mike Jones not being with us here today. Something popped up at the last minute. Wasn't able to make it, and we can't thank you enough for tuning in. Staying away from anything solid tonight, although the lean would be just in general principle to go ahead and take double-digit points with anybody in the National Football League. Dare I say it? I'm becoming very reluctant. I mean, you talk about having a hesitance to take a commitment on this thing, but probably inclined to take the 12 and a half with the Jets. As crummy as the Jets are, and as well as the Patriots are playing, double digits, NFL, even on the road, are a very favorable circumstance in most situations. All right, thanks so much for being with us. For Mike, who wasn't able to make it today, and all the people connected with the program here on NoFilter.net, I'm Jeff DeForrest. We'll see you tomorrow on the Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie.